Hi, and welcome to this flipped instructional session. I am Mrs. Fessel, and this is Earth Science. Today we will be talking about Lesson 1.04, Mapping the Earth. Just a few reminders. Watch this flipped lesson recording before you come to the Class Connect session. Then look for the flipped follow-up on your schedule where we'll do fun activities to follow up from this lesson. Today's goals are going to be to use latitude and longitude to locate places on a map, to determine the scale of a map, and to interpret maps using scale, direction, keys, and symbols. So let's get started. So just a little background on map making. So early map makers had to keep careful records of landforms, hills, valleys, bodies of water, etc., the position of the sun, and the motion of the sea, in order to be able to make maps. Luckily today, satellites orbit the Earth, doing most of our map making. One of the hardest things about map making is taking something that's round, our Earth, and making it flat, as you'll see in the next screen. So a globe, most accurately, as up here, represents the Earth because it's round like the Earth. But unfortunately, you can't carry a globe with you at all times. It would be awkward to carry around a basketball like this. So cartographers, who are map makers, they make flat maps from the globes. But as you can see from this bottom picture here, it's hard to flatten a circular object. So that poses a few problems for our map makers. So here's an example of one of the problems it poses. So a map projection is a way to show a curved surface on a flat one. What happens is the area near the poles gets really stretched out because, as you saw in the last one, you can't just cut up a globe and make it flat. So places near the equator look similar. If you compare these two maps, Africa looks pretty similar in both of them. But things near the poles get all stretched out. This example here shows that Greenland is pretty small, way up here near the Arctic Circle. But when it gets flattened out on a map, it looks much larger. Same thing for Antarctica here at the bottom. It gets all stretched out. So that's one problem that map makers come up against. So now that we've talked a little bit about the making of maps, we're going to talk a little bit about how to find places on a map. So the first thing we need to know is latitude. So we're going to talk about latitude and longitude, which are easy to get confused. So we're going to talk about some ways to keep them separate. So latitude lines, one way to remember it is latitude is flat. Latitude, flatitude. So these are rungs on a ladder that allow you to climb up and down the globe. And these are measured north and south, degrees north and south of the equator. So as you can see, the equator right here, and with my pointer, my equator right here, and then anything above it is degrees north of the equator, anything below it is degrees south of the equator. And it goes all the way up to the North Pole at 90 degrees north, the South Pole at 90 degrees south. And places on a map come in a coordinate pair, or a set of numbers. So latitude is always going to come first in a coordinate pair. So next we have longitude. The longitude lines, one way I try to remember it is the longitude lines are long. They're long up and down. They run the length of the globe. So they are vertical lines that run from the North Pole to the South Pole, but they're measuring degrees west and east of the prime meridian. So similar to the equator, the prime meridian is an imaginary line that runs from the North Pole all the way down to the South Pole, and it is 0 degrees longitude. So then we have degrees west and degrees east of the prime meridian, and it's going to come second in the coordinate pair. And we're going to do an example of this in a minute. So this is just one more reminder. Latitude will be listed first in a set of coordinate pairs. Longitude will be listed second in a set of coordinate pairs. So they come in alphabetical order. LA latitude is followed by LO longitude. So let's do an example. So which city is at 32 degrees north, 122 degrees east? So first I want to look at my degrees north of the equator over here on the side. So I see 32 degrees north would be right about here, between 30 and 35. So it looks like it might be Shanghai, but let's check our longitude. 122 degrees east. If I come down here to the east coordinates, yep, I would find out that the correct answer is D, Shanghai. So if you come to the flipped follow-up, we'll do more practice about finding places using latitude and longitude. Next, we have a map scale. Real places are, as you know, hundreds and thousands of miles apart. Obviously, maps aren't going to be hundreds and thousands of miles wide, so they have scales to help you understand the distance from place to place. So for example, on this map, 2.5 centimeters on the scale equals 5 kilometers or 3.11 miles of real ground distance. So if we look here, from Freedom to Lincoln is 10 centimeters. So if you think for a minute, how many kilometers would that be if 2.5 centimeters equals 5 kilometers? So again, 2.5 centimeters equals 5 kilometers. So if I count here on my ruler, so there's 5 kilometers at 2.5 centimeters. At 5, we'd be at 10. 7.5 would be at 15. 10, we'd be at 20 kilometers. So they're actually 20 kilometers apart. Or another way to do it would be that 10 divided by 2.5 is 4. 4 times that 5 kilometers equals 20 kilometers. So that would be another way to figure out the scale. And we're also going to do more scale practice activities at the flipped follow-up. So the last thing we're going to mention for today is map symbols. So if you see a map, there's colors, patterns, and symbols that represent different things. For example, blue areas usually represent water, whereas green areas usually represent land. A solid line might indicate a road, whereas a dotted line might be a trail. So oftentimes at the bottom of a map, there'll be a map legend that shows the meanings of symbols, and oftentimes the scale will be in the legend as well. So for example, if you were to create a legend for this map, what symbols would you use? Oftentimes an H is for a hospital. So you might put H for hospital over on a legend. P for parking. These red lines look like major roads, whereas these yellow lines might be minor roads. Green is probably a park, and as we said, blue is probably lakes and rivers. So during the flipped follow-up, we also have a map symbol activity that we will be participating in. So that's our flipped recording for today. So your next steps would be to look for the flipped follow-up session in your Class Connect schedule. To attend this live session, we'll practice latitude and longitude, scale, and using map symbols in the flipped lesson. If you need any extra help, please attend the Help Lab sessions. And as always, I hope you have fun learning. I'm Mrs. Fessel, and thank you for joining me for this flipped recording.